She mourned her Lakota warrior for months, then found him tied to a tree. The northern plains were quiet, almost eerily so, as the winds whispered through the tall grasses. It was a land of open skies, rolling hills, and scattered trees, where life moved at a rhythm dictated by nature. In one small settlement nestled among the plains and protected by low wooden fences, lived a young Lakota woman. Her name had become known for her calm strength and gentle spirit, but for months now, her eyes held a sadness that no one could soothe. Her heart had been tied to a man who was no longer in the world she knew, or at least, that's what everyone believed.
Months earlier, the settlement had been rocked by news of a violent clash on the borders of their territory.
Rival groups had fought over land and resources, and in the chaos, a brave Lakota warrior had disappeared. He was respected by all who knew him, a man known for his courage, intelligence, and unshakable sense of honor. When the word reached the settlement that he had fallen during the battle, it was like a shadow falling over every home. People gathered in quiet mourning, their faces somber, their hands pressed together in silent prayer. Smoke from small fires curled into the sky, carrying whispered words meant to honor the lost. She had attended the ceremony, her hands folded in front of her, listening to the elders speak of bravery and duty. Her chest had tightened with grief as she imagined him falling on a distant battlefield, far away from her reach, fighting for people he loved and a land he believed in. The thought of him struggling, alone and unprotected, had been unbearable. Yet she had accepted it, because no one returned from such battles without leaving a mark, and no news of his survival had come. After the ceremony, life had carried on in its quiet rhythm, but for her, the days had become a haze. She moved through them almost mechanically, waking each morning, tending to her small garden, helping with chores, and speaking to neighbors. But her heart was elsewhere. Everywhere she went, she saw reminders of him. The ridge where he once stood to watch the sunrise, the trees they had walked beneath together, and even the small stream where he had taught her to skip stones. These places brought memories that both comforted and tormented her. At night she would lie awake, staring at the stars, imagining him looking up at the same sky, wishing he were still beside her. The community watched her silently. Elders exchanged worried glances when she passed, understanding that grief had its own pace and path. Some offered words of comfort, others simply nodded and gave her space. Everyone knew that the young woman had loved the warrior deeply, and losing him had left a void that was hard to fill. Still, life in the settlement had to continue, and the people worked to rebuild the sense of normalcy that the battle had disrupted. Months passed, and although she tried to accept his absence, small, unexplained things began to trouble her. Unfamiliar tracks appeared near the edge of the settlement, sometimes leading toward the forest or the hills beyond. Traders passing through whispered of seeing men captured or led away by unknown forces, and an old scout returned with stories of a man who matched the description of the warrior, seen far from the battlefield. At first, she refused to listen. She told herself these were only rumors, tales meant to soothe the pain of those left behind. She could not bear to let hope flicker only to be extinguished again. But the signs persisted. A wounded horse appeared near the outskirts, its bridle torn, and eyes wide with fear. She had ridden that horse herself once, with him guiding her, teaching her how to read the wind and follow the subtle signs of the plains. Seeing it now, alone and frightened, stirred something within her that she could not ignore. She began noticing subtle changes in the forest paths, broken branches that looked too deliberate to be natural, small fires long extinguished, and discarded ropes hidden under bushes. Each discovery made her heart beat faster, a mixture of fear and a strange, persistent hope. She remembered every lesson the warrior had taught her. He had been patient, wise, and steady in the face of danger. He had shown her how to track animals, read the signs of weather, and sense when someone was near. He had taught her courage not by words but by example, standing firm even when situations seemed hopeless. And now, months after his supposed death, she realized those lessons were more important than ever. If he was out there, if he had survived, she knew she could not wait for him to come home. She had to act. Her nights were restless. Sleep came in short, uneasy bursts, filled with dreams that blurred reality. Sometimes she dreamt of him tied, struggling against invisible hands, Other times she saw him wandering through dense forests, alone and wary. Each vision left her with a tightening in her chest and a feeling that she must find him before it was too late. She began to plan quietly, gathering supplies, studying maps of the surrounding lands, and preparing herself for the journey she felt destined to undertake. She spoke little of it to others, knowing that many would warn her against chasing a shadow. Some even scolded her gently, saying that the warrior was gone, and that hope could be a dangerous thing when clung to too tightly. Still, she could not let go. Every day she retraced the paths he had taken, visited familiar landmarks, and asked travelers if they had seen a man fitting his description. Each fragment of information, no matter how small, she held close, a broken arrow here, a worn footprint there, and whispers of strange encampments in hidden valleys. All of these were pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. She knew that survival in these lands required patience and a keen eye, and she remembered how he had praised her for noticing details others overlooked. Even as she gathered her courage and prepared for what lay ahead, she battled her own doubts. What if he had truly been lost? What if the rumors were false, and all her efforts would lead only to disappointment? The thought made her stomach tighten, but the memory of his face, his laughter, and his unwavering eyes gave her the strength to continue. She remembered the promise he had made before leaving for battle, a promise that he would return, no matter the danger. She clung to that promise like a lifeline, even if it seemed impossible now. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting golden light across the plains, she stood on the ridge they had once visited together. The wind played with her hair, and the sky seemed vast and endless above her. In that moment, she felt a spark of determination ignite. If he was alive, she would find him. If he needed help, she would give it. Months of mourning had prepared her for this challenge, shaping her into someone ready to face whatever lay ahead. She knew the journey would not be easy, that danger waited in hidden places, and that each step could bring disappointment. Yet she felt a quiet certainty that she could not ignore. The northern plains were silent witnesses to her resolve. Birds flew overhead, their cries echoing across the valleys, and the distant mountains stood like ancient sentinels. She breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the crisp air, and felt the weight of grief begin to shift, replaced with determination. She would not let the warrior remain lost. She would follow every lead, every clue, until she found him or knew the truth with certainty. The months of waiting and sorrow had not broken her. They had prepared her. And as the stars began to appear in the evening sky, she whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would bring him home. The morning air was crisp and fresh as she set out from the small settlement, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She carried a small pack with the essentials: water, dried meat, a blanket, a knife, and a few tools he had once taught her to use. Every item reminded her of the warrior she had loved, every memory a spark that fueled her resolve. The sun had barely risen when she followed the faint trail that led toward the forest beyond the plains. She moved carefully, eyes scanning the ground for signs of footprints, broken twigs, or any indication that someone had passed this way. Her mind replayed the last time she had seen him, the way he had smiled, the gentle but firm grip of his hand as they walked together across the hills. Those memories were bittersweet, a mix of longing and hope. She whispered his name softly as she walked, as if calling him from the shadows, as if her voice could reach him even now. The forest ahead was dense, its tall trees casting long shadows over the undergrowth. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in thin, golden streams, creating patterns on the ground that danced as she moved. She thought about what the old scout had told her, the man who had seen someone resembling the warrior far from the battlefield. He had said that the man looked weak, exhausted, and weary, but unmistakably him. That small piece of hope had taken root in her heart, and now it guided every step she took. She knew the journey would not be easy. There were dangers she could not predict. Wild animals, rough terrain, and possibly the people who had taken him. Yet the thought of finding him alive made her muscles tense with readiness, her senses alert to every sound and movement around her. Hours passed as she moved deeper into the forest. She listened to the whisper of leaves, the soft creak of branches, and the distant cry of birds. Occasionally, she would pause and crouch, examining the ground carefully. Broken twigs, footprints in the soft soil, and scuffed patches of grass all told a story, one that her mind carefully pieced together. She remembered how the warrior had taught her to read such signs, how he had said that the land always spoke to those who listened. She followed these subtle clues, each one a thread leading her closer to him. The journey tested her patience. Some trails led to dead ends, forcing her to backtrack, while others seemed to vanish entirely under dense foliage. She grew tired, her legs aching from long hours of walking, and her stomach growled with hunger. Yet she pressed on, stopping only to eat small pieces of dried meat or sip from her water supply. She reminded herself that the warrior would never give up, that he had faced challenges far greater than these and survived. If he had survived, she could too. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, she came across signs that someone had been moving through the forest recently. Broken branches formed a rough path, and small fires had been extinguished but left ashes behind. She paused, studying the area carefully. It was clear that whoever had been here had hidden their presence well, moving quietly and leaving few traces. But she was determined, using every skill she had learned from the warrior to follow these subtle signs. Each small clue added to her growing confidence that she was on the right path. She remembered the stories of prisoners taken during conflicts, stories told by travelers and traders who had passed through the settlement. Many had been held in remote areas, tied to trees or kept in hidden camps until they could be moved again. Her heart tightened at the thought. Could he have been one of these captives? The possibility made her quicken her pace, her eyes scanning every tree, every bush, every shadow where someone could be hidden. By mid-afternoon, she reached a small stream that cut through the forest. She paused to drink, kneeling by the water and letting it run over her hands. The sound of the flowing water was calming, yet it reminded her that time was passing. He might be injured, weak, or in danger, and every hour mattered. She washed her face with the cold water, feeling a renewed sense of clarity. She would not falter. She would find him, no matter the cost. As she continued, she met her first obstacle, a dense thicket of brambles that blocked the trail. She moved carefully, using her knife to cut through only what was necessary, avoiding unnecessary noise. The forest was alive with sound, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a hawk, the soft movement of small animals. Every sound made her alert, every shadow a potential threat. She remembered how the warrior had moved silently through such terrain, never making a sound, always aware of his surroundings. She tried to emulate him, feeling his presence in the lessons he had left her. Hours turned into the afternoon, and she finally spotted signs of human activity that could not be ignored. There were footprints, partially hidden but distinct enough to follow, leading toward a small clearing she had never seen before. She crouched low, moving cautiously, keeping herself hidden among the trees. Her heart pounded in her chest. Could he be here? Was this the place he had been brought to? Every step made her more anxious, but also more determined. She whispered his name again, quietly, as if calling him to her. In the clearing, she saw evidence of recent captivity, ropes, scraps of cloth, and disturbed earth where someone had clearly been struggling. Her breath caught in her throat. She moved closer, scanning the area for signs of life. Her eyes searched every shadow, every tree trunk, every bush, and then she saw it. A faint outline, a figure lying still, partially hidden behind a fallen log. Her heart leaped. She could not see clearly from this distance, but the shape seemed familiar, and a glimmer of hope surged through her. She crouched behind a tree, considering her next move. She had to be careful. If someone was guarding him, or if he was still weak, any wrong move could put them both in danger. She took a deep breath, recalling the warrior's teachings: patience, observation, and strategy. She studied the area carefully, noting the best path to approach without making noise or revealing herself. Every step, every movement had to be calculated. As she crept closer, she noticed small details that confirmed her hope. A worn piece of clothing she recognized, a familiar band around the arm, and the way the body was positioned. It was him. She could hardly believe it, but there was no doubt. He was alive, tied and weak, but unmistakably him. Relief washed over her, mingled with fear and urgency. She had found him, but the journey was far from over. She had to free him, and she had to do it carefully. Her mind raced, planning the next steps. She remembered how he had always remained calm under pressure, and she knew she had to emulate that now. She checked her pack for rope to help untie him if needed, and considered how to move him without alerting anyone nearby. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay silent, steady, and focused. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would get him out of here safely, no matter what. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she prepared to take the next step. She moved slowly, every sense alert, every movement precise. The warrior, her love, her partner in life, was alive, and she would do everything in her power to bring him back. Months of grief, months of preparation, and months of hope had led her to this moment. She would not fail. She would face whatever challenges lay ahead, guided by love, courage, and the lessons he had left her. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing, she finally reached the tree where he was tied. Her hands shook slightly, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was the moment she had trained for in her mind over countless nights. Every step, every observation, every memory had prepared her for this reunion. She knelt beside him, studying the ropes and knots, recalling the techniques he had taught her. Carefully, she began to work, slowly and methodically, ensuring she made no sound that could give them away. Hours of searching, following clues, and preparing had led to this moment. She was close, closer than she had ever been since the day he had disappeared. Her heart beat fast, but her mind remained clear. She would free him, and together they would find a way back. The forest, with all its danger and mystery, had brought her to him, and she would not let fear or doubt stand in her way. The forest was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves in the wind and the distant calls of birds. She knelt behind a large tree, her heart pounding in her chest. There he was, tied to a tree, slumped slightly forward, his face pale and his body weak from months of struggle. The sight of him was both heartbreaking and relieving. He was alive, but barely. Her hand shook slightly as she considered the task ahead, freeing him without alerting anyone who might be nearby. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. She remembered all the lessons he had taught her about moving quietly, about observing before acting, and about patience. This was not the time to act hastily. She crouched low, moving slowly across the clearing, careful not to snap any twigs beneath her feet. The warrior stirred slightly, his head turning toward the faint sound of her movement, but he did not cry out. Relief and fear surged through her, relief because he was alive, and fear because he was so weak. She studied the ropes that bound him, noticing how tightly they had been tied. The knots were rough, unskilled, but secure enough to prevent him from escaping on his own. She gently ran her fingers along the coarse fibers, recalling the way he had once untied knots for her during training. Her mind raced, calculating the best way to loosen them without causing him pain or attracting attention. She whispered his name softly, barely audible, and he responded with a weak murmur, his eyes opening slowly. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by confusion and then relief. "You?" he whispered, his voice hoarse and barely audible. She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm here." "I found you," she said gently. "We have to get you out." He tried to speak further, but exhaustion overtook him, and he slumped slightly against the tree again. She brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, her heart aching at how frail he looked. Working slowly, she began to untie the ropes. Each knot required patience and care. She paused several times, listening for any sound that might indicate someone was nearby. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the delicate moment unfolding. She remembered the old scout's words. Prisoners were often moved quietly, hidden in areas no one would think to search. Whoever had left him here might return at any moment. She could not afford mistakes. Minutes passed like hours as she worked. Her hands grew sore, her fingers stiff from the strain, but she pressed on, driven by the thought of getting him to safety. The warrior shifted slightly, groaning softly.
She spoke to him in a calm, soothing voice. Almost there.
Stay with me. You're safe now. His eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of gratitude, relief, and pain. She had never seen him look so vulnerable, and yet that vulnerability made her determination stronger. She would not leave him here. Not now. Not ever. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last knot gave way. The ropes fell to the ground with a soft thud. She immediately checked him, ensuring that he could move his arms and legs. He was weak, his muscles stiff from lack of use, but there were no serious injuries that would prevent them from moving. He took a shallow breath, leaning against her for support. I can't stand yet, he admitted, his voice weak. She nodded, understanding. They would have to move slowly, carefully, so he could regain strength along the way. She looked around the clearing, noting the safest path to move him without being seen. The trees provided cover, but the area was open enough that anyone returning could spot them. She scanned the perimeter, searching for any signs of movement, listening for distant voices or snapping branches. There was nothing, only the quiet whisper of the forest. It was enough for her to begin, but she knew they could not linger. Every moment increased the risk of being discovered. Supporting him carefully, she helped him to stand. His legs trembled, barely able to hold his weight, but she held him steady, her arms strong and reassuring. Step by step, they began to move through the forest. Each movement required patience, as she adjusted her pace to match his strength. The forest floor was uneven, littered with fallen branches, rocks, and hidden roots. She navigated carefully, her senses alert to every sound, every shadow. She whispered encouragements, reminding him of the safe path they were following. Along the way, he shared fragments of his experience, his voice weak but steady. They captured us after the battle, took many to hidden camps. I tried to escape. His words were broken, halting, but they gave her valuable information. She listened intently, piecing together his journey and the dangers they might still face. The captors had been cruel but not careless, leaving signs that could be traced if one knew what to look for. Her heart ached at the thought of what he had endured, but it also steeled her resolve. She would not let him face anything like that again. They moved cautiously, stopping often to rest and hide in the shadows of the trees. She checked his condition frequently, ensuring he could continue without risking collapse. Her eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, alert for any movement, any hint of danger. Hours seemed to pass in the forest, time marked only by the shifting light through the trees and the slow progress of their careful journey. She whispered words of comfort, recalling stories they had shared before his capture, memories of laughter and shared triumphs. Each memory bolstered their strength, reminding them of the life waiting beyond this ordeal. At one point, they came to a small creek, the water shallow and clear. She helped him kneel beside it, allowing him to drink slowly. The cool water refreshed him slightly, giving him the strength to continue. She drank as well, filling her senses with the clarity of the moment, focusing on the path ahead. Every decision mattered now. One mistake could lead them back into danger. The forest seemed endless, yet each step brought them closer to the edge, to safety, and to the settlement that awaited them. As they moved further, she noticed signs that someone might have returned recently to check the area. Broken branches, footprints in the soft soil, and the smell of a campfire faintly lingering in the air made her pause. She crouched low, signaling for him to stay quiet. They hid behind a large fallen log, holding their breath as the forest remained silent. Her mind worked quickly, calculating the safest route around potential threats. Patience, observation, and caution, everything the warrior had taught her, guided her now. Finally, they reached a denser part of the forest, where the trees were thicker and the undergrowth provided better cover. Here, She allowed him to lean more on her, guiding him carefully through the tangled terrain. He moved slowly but steadily, the support of her presence giving him strength. Each step was a victory, a small triumph over the months of suffering he had endured. She felt a surge of hope. They were still in danger, yes, but they were moving, together, toward freedom. She whispered softly, reassuring him with each step. "We're almost there. Just a little further. Stay with me." He nodded, his eyes tired but focused, trusting her guidance completely. In that moment she realized the depth of their bond, not just love, but trust forged in shared experience and mutual respect. It was a connection that had endured even through separation, captivity, and fear. Hours passed, and the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the forest floor. She knew they needed to find a safe place to rest for the night before continuing the journey to the settlement. She searched for a small clearing, concealed by trees and brush, where they could lie low without being seen. She found it near a gentle slope, with dense bushes providing cover. Helping him down carefully, she ensured he was comfortable and safe. The warrior leaned against her, exhaustion evident in every line of his body, but a spark of gratitude shone in his eyes. That night, as they rested quietly in the shelter of the forest, she reflected on the journey so far. She had found him, she had freed him, and they were moving toward safety. The forest had been challenging, the risks high, but together they had overcome the first part of the ordeal. She looked at him, the man she loved and had mourned, and felt a deep sense of relief and determination. There was still more to do, more dangers to navigate, but for now, they had each other. That was enough to face whatever lay ahead. The first light of dawn filtered through the dense forest, painting the leaves with a soft golden glow. She stirred carefully, making sure the warrior was still breathing, and that he had not moved in a way that might hurt himself. His body was weak, his muscles stiff from days of captivity and lack of movement. But his eyes were alert, and a faint spark of recognition passed between them. They shared a quiet smile, a small but powerful reassurance that they were together, and that was enough to give them courage for the day ahead. The forest around them was alive with the sounds of morning. Birds called to one another from high branches, and the soft rustle of leaves hinted at small animals moving through the undergrowth. She stood slowly, brushing dirt and leaves from her clothes, and extended a hand to the warrior. He grasped it tightly, leaning on her for support as he rose. Every movement required care. His legs wobbled, and his breath came in shallow gasps, but he trusted her completely. She guided him step by step, slowly moving toward the safest path that would lead them out of the forest. She paused frequently, listening and scanning the surroundings. Every shadow, every sound could indicate danger, and months of preparation had taught her to be vigilant. She whispered instructions to him in a calm voice, guiding him over roots and rocks, reminding him to step carefully. At times she carried him for short distances, supporting his weight and keeping him hidden behind the thick trunks of trees. The forest seemed endless, but she knew they had to move steadily if they were to reach the open plains safely. As the morning progressed, she realized that they were being followed. At first, it was subtle, a broken twig here, a faint rustle there, but her senses, sharpened by worry and experience, detected it. Someone was moving through the forest, keeping a careful distance, watching for signs of their presence. She froze, pressing the warrior close to her as they ducked behind a fallen log. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic would only make them visible. They had to move strategically, avoiding detection at all costs. After a few tense minutes, she decided it was safe to continue. She led him along a winding path that hugged the edge of a small stream, using the water to mask the sounds of their footsteps. The warrior leaned heavily on her, trusting her judgment completely. She whispered encouragements, reminding him to focus on the steps ahead and not the threat that lingered somewhere in the forest. Every branch, every shadow was a test of patience and courage, and she felt the weight of responsibility heavily on her shoulders. She could not afford mistakes, not now, not when freedom was so close. By midday they had reached a part of the forest where the trees were thicker, the undergrowth more tangled. This was both a blessing and a challenge. The thick vegetation provided cover, hiding them from potential pursuers, but it also made movement slow and difficult. She navigated carefully, guiding him over fallen branches, through small clearings, and around patches of dense brush. Her hands were scratched and her clothes torn in places, but she ignored the discomfort. Their survival depended on her focus and determination. Along the way, the warrior began to share more of his story. His voice was weak, but steady. They kept us moving. Small groups, hidden camps. I tried to escape, but he trailed off, his breath coming in shallow gasps. She listened intently, each word filling in pieces of the ordeal he had endured. She could feel his pain, but also his resilience. Every story of survival, every moment of endurance, strengthened her resolve. They had both suffered, but together they could overcome the remaining obstacles. Hours passed as they moved cautiously through the forest. She found small streams for them to drink from, patches of shade to rest briefly, and low hills to provide cover from potential watchers. She whispered to him constantly, sharing memories of times before the battle, of laughter and quiet moments they had enjoyed together. These words were not just comfort. They were a lifeline, a reminder of the life that awaited them beyond the forest, a promise that freedom was within reach. By mid-afternoon, they reached the edge of the forest, where the trees began to thin and the open plains stretched out before them. Relief surged through her, but she did not let her guard down. The open land was beautiful, with rolling hills and tall grasses swaying in the breeze, but it was also dangerous. They were exposed now, and any pursuers would have a clear line of sight. She guided the warrior into a narrow strip of low shrubs and tall grass, using it as cover as they moved slowly toward the safer distance of the next ridge. Every step was measured, every movement careful. The warrior leaned on her more heavily now, exhaustion visible in every line of his body. She whispered softly, encouraging him to keep going. "Almost there. Just a little further. Stay with me," she said, her voice steady despite the fear and tension that gripped her. His trust in her was absolute, and that trust fueled her determination. She would not let him falter. She would not let them be caught after coming this far. As they moved across the open plains, they encountered a small stream. She led him to the water, helping him kneel as he drank slowly. The cool liquid refreshed him, giving him a bit of strength for the journey ahead. She drank as well, feeling her own energy renewed, and then continued guiding him carefully through the tall grasses. The plain seemed endless, but every ridge, every hill, brought them closer to the settlement and safety. Along the way, she spotted signs that someone had been tracking them. Small footprints in the soft earth, broken grass, and distant movements suggested that their pursuers were not far behind. She froze, pressing the warrior to the ground and whispering for him to remain quiet. They waited, hearts pounding, as the rustling of leaves and snapping of twigs passed by without incident. The danger was real, but they had learned to move carefully, to be patient, and to trust one another. Their survival depended on these skills and on their unwavering determination. By late afternoon, they reached a small wooded area providing temporary cover from the open plains. She guided him to the ground, allowing him to rest while she scanned the surroundings. Every shadow, every rustle, every distant sound was carefully noted. She knew that they still had a journey ahead, but for now, they could rest briefly and regain their strength. She whispered to him softly, reminding him that they had come so far and that safety was almost within reach. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the plains, they continued their cautious journey. The warrior's strength was slowly returning, thanks to her care and guidance. Each step forward was a small victory, a testament to their resilience and determination. She shared memories of their life before the battle, of quiet evenings by the fire, of laughter and stories shared under the stars. These words were more than comfort. They were motivation, a reminder of what awaited them beyond the forest and the dangers of the plains. By nightfall, they reached a small hill overlooking a familiar part of the settlement. Relief and joy surged through her. The journey had been long and perilous, but they were finally close. She guided the warrior carefully down the hill, keeping him hidden from view until they were safely within the outskirts of the community. Neighbors and friends who had feared the worst now watched in astonishment as the young woman led the once-lost warrior back into their midst. The reunion was quiet but deeply emotional. She helped him to sit, supporting him as he looked around at the familiar faces of their community. The warrior, once weak and vulnerable, now began to regain a sense of strength, bolstered by her unwavering care and determination. The months of fear, suffering, and uncertainty were behind them, and the journey ahead would focus on healing and rebuilding. As they rested that night, surrounded by the safety of the settlement, she reflected on the journey they had undertaken. They had faced danger, exhaustion, and uncertainty together, but their bond had grown stronger through every trial. She realized that her courage and determination had been just as important as his resilience. Together they had overcome impossible odds, and together they would face the challenges of recovery and the rebuilding of their lives. The forest and plains that had tested them so severely were now behind them. They had survived the dangers of captivity in the wilderness, and they had returned home with strength, hope, and an unbreakable connection. As they sat quietly that night, watching the stars appear in the sky, they understood that their journey had not only been about survival, it had been about trust, love, and the power of perseverance. The morning sun rose slowly over the northern plains, casting golden light across the settlement. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint smell of grass and earth. For the first time in months, the young Lakota woman felt a sense of peace as she looked around. The warrior, once believed lost, was now resting beside her, alive and slowly regaining his strength. Though his body remained weak from months of captivity, his eyes held a quiet determination, a reflection of the resilience she had always admired. Together they watched the sunlight dance over the land, a reminder of life continuing despite all the hardships they had faced. The community, which had mourned the warrior's loss, now began to welcome him back, with careful optimism. Families and neighbors gathered at a respectful distance, observing the miraculous reunion with a mixture of relief and awe. For many it was hard to believe that the man who had been gone for so long was truly alive. Children peeked from behind fences, curious and excited, while the elders nodded quietly, their expressions filled with wisdom and understanding. They knew the hardships he had endured, and they recognized the courage it had taken for both of them to return. She guided him slowly through the familiar streets of the settlement, supporting him with gentle strength. Each step was measured and deliberate, ensuring he would not stumble or strain himself. The warrior leaned on her, trusting her completely, and in that trust she found a profound sense of purpose. They passed familiar landmarks, the small well where he had drawn water, the communal fire pit where stories were told at night, and the ridge overlooking the plains that had once been their favorite place to watch the sunrise. Each sight reminded them of a life that had paused during his absence, but was now beginning to continue. As they reached the central area of the settlement, neighbors began to approach carefully, offering words of welcome and encouragement. Some brought food and blankets, understanding that he needed nourishment and rest to recover fully. Others shared quiet words, expressing their amazement and gratitude for the young woman's bravery. She nodded to them, her face calm but eyes bright with emotion. She had not undertaken this journey for recognition, but she could not deny the satisfaction of seeing her community relieved and hopeful once more. The warrior's first steps without assistance were small, cautious, and deliberate. He tested his legs slowly, the muscles weak but regaining strength with every movement. The young woman remained by his side, her hands ready to support him if needed. Each step forward was a triumph, a testament to his resilience and the care she had provided. The people around them watched quietly, understanding the significance of each moment. He had not simply returned alive. He had returned whole enough to continue living, and that was a reason for gratitude and celebration. Over the next days he began a slow recovery, aided by the young woman and the community. They provided him with nourishing food, warm blankets, and gentle encouragement. She stayed close, helping him with daily tasks and ensuring that he did not overexert himself. At first, he could do very little, walking short distances, performing small chores, and sitting quietly to regain strength. Yet every day brought improvement. His body, though weary from months of confinement and struggle, remembered the skills and strength he had always possessed. In the evenings, as the sun set over the plains, the young woman and the warrior would sit together quietly. He often shared stories of what had happened during his captivity, recounting the days he had spent tied and watched, the small struggles to survive, and the moments of hope that had kept him going. His voice was steady, though tinged with emotion, and she listened carefully, offering comfort and understanding. Each story was a reminder of the challenges he had endured, and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The people of the settlement slowly adapted to his return, helping him regain his confidence and place in the community. Friends and family brought small gifts, tools to help him with daily work, food, and items that reminded him of the life he had paused. Children watched him with curiosity, fascinated by the idea of someone returning after being thought lost. The elders offered guidance, sharing wisdom about recovery, patience, and rebuilding trust in both the world and themselves. Throughout it all, the young woman remained at his side, her presence a constant source of reassurance and strength. As weeks passed, the warrior regained more of his physical strength, able to walk longer distances and perform tasks that once seemed impossible. Yet the most significant recovery was emotional. He had faced months of fear, isolation, and uncertainty, and now, surrounded by people who cared and by the woman who had risked everything to find him, he began to heal inside. They shared quiet moments together, watching the stars, walking along familiar paths, and simply sitting in the sun, moments that reminded them both of life before the battle and the bond that had sustained them through the darkest times. The young woman, too, experienced her own transformation. The months of mourning and the journey to find him had tested her in ways she could not have imagined. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and physical exhaustion, yet through it all, she had remained determined. She realized that her courage had not only saved him, but had also strengthened her own spirit. The experience deepened her understanding of resilience, love, and the importance of trust. She had discovered within herself a strength she had not fully known, a capacity for care and bravery that had carried them both back to safety. One afternoon, the warrior and the young woman walked to the ridge they had once visited together. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of earth and new growth. They stood side by side, watching the sun dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink, orange, and gold. The landscape stretched endlessly before them, a reminder of the vastness of the world and the journey they had taken to return to this moment. They shared a quiet understanding, a bond strengthened by hardship and hope. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of gratitude and emotion. "For finding me, for never giving up." She smiled, her eyes shining. "I could not have left you behind," she replied. "Not after everything. We belong together, and we always will." Their hands found one another, fingers intertwining, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. It was a promise of care, trust, and shared strength, a commitment to face whatever came next together. The community slowly returned to its normal rhythm, and the warrior began to reclaim his place among them. He helped with daily tasks, shared stories of resilience, and offered guidance to younger members of the settlement. The young woman remained his companion, her presence a constant reminder of the courage and love that had brought him home. Their bond became an example to the community of dedication, bravery, and the power of hope in the face of despair. In the evenings, they would often sit by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet reflection. The warrior recounted lessons learned during captivity, about patience, perseverance, and the strength that comes from enduring hardship. She listened, sharing her own experiences of the journey and the inner strength it had revealed. Together they celebrated not only survival but the growth and understanding that came from facing adversity and overcoming it together. Over time, the warrior regained full strength, able to move freely across the plains and engage in the work of daily life. Yet the memory of his captivity and the young woman's journey to find him remained a deep bond between them. It was not a bond built solely on love, but on shared struggle, courage, and unwavering trust. They had faced the worst the world could offer, and they had returned stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever. The settlement thrived with their presence. Neighbors and friends recognized the story of survival and reunion as a source of inspiration, reminding everyone that hope, determination, and care could overcome even the darkest circumstances. The young woman and the warrior became symbols of resilience, demonstrating that even when life seems hopeless, courage and love could light the way. As the sun set each evening, casting long shadows across the plains, they would often walk together hand in hand along the familiar paths of the settlement. The land that had once seemed harsh and unforgiving now felt alive and welcoming. They spoke little, content in the silence and the shared understanding that they had returned from the brink. Their journey had been long and difficult, but the present moment, shared in quiet companionship, was enough. Months after their return, the young woman reflected on everything that had occurred. The months of mourning, the journey through the forest, the dangers faced, and the eventual reunion had transformed her in ways she had never imagined. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the persistence to act despite it. Love was not only about affection, but about care, sacrifice, and the willingness to face uncertainty for the sake of another. She had learned that resilience was not a solitary strength, but something strengthened through trust, connection, and determination. The warrior, too, carried lessons from their journey. He had faced captivity, fear, and weakness, yet he had survived, returning to life with new appreciation and understanding. He recognized the courage of the young woman, who had risked everything to find him, and he knew that their bond had been solidified not only by love but by shared experience and endurance. Together, they had discovered the true depth of commitment, loyalty, and care. As the seasons changed, the young woman and the warrior continued to live their lives fully, embracing the beauty of each day. They worked together, shared stories, and supported the community, knowing that their journey had given them not only survival, but wisdom. Their story became part of the settlement's history, a tale of courage, resilience, and the power of hope. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, determination and care could overcome obstacles and bring people home. The final evening of the story finds them standing on the ridge overlooking the plains once more. The wind plays gently with their hair, carrying the scent of the earth and the promise of tomorrow. The sun dips below the horizon, leaving a sky painted in warm colors. They stand together silently, hands intertwined, hearts full, and minds calm. The journey had ended, but their lives were just beginning again, stronger and more connected than ever. In that moment, they understood the true meaning of endurance, hope, and love. They had faced separation, fear, and uncertainty, and they had returned to each other stronger than before. The settlement, the plains, and the forest that had tested them were now witnesses to their resilience. And as night fell over the northern lands, they walked side by side toward the life they had reclaimed, ready to embrace the future together.